Walied, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you, Safia, for the opportunity.
Now, earlier you told me that this is your favorite topic, community building.
Yes.
So why is community building so important to you?
I think community building is a passion that I have because I believe many solutions could be found in that simple concept when we even develop our city, right? Like it needs to be intentional, it needs to be about building community. And I believe that when folks live in their communities and they invest in their communities, they're able to better address sort of the social issues that we right now are being challenged with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's community safety, whether it's climate change and living sustainably. So big supporter of community building, and I think that we all need to be invested in that process.
Mm-hmm. So there are different ways that you can think about community, right? You can think about it in a regional way, or you can think about it in the sense of a common interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I sense that you're thinking about community in a regional sense,
Yep.
as in people in a particular neighborhood, right?
Yeah, but also have a shared common interest, right? You know.
So how do you get to that stage where people living in a certain area develop that common interest that you're talking about?
Well, I think we need to start empowering folks to start being invested in their communities. And I think like as governments, as social change makers, as folks who are invested in alleviating poverty and homelessness, we need to like seriously commit to making sure that we meet the basic human rights of everyone living in Canada, right? And that means truly investing in communities. And that's by developing communities through community-led initiatives. You know, the sort of development that I see is more about profit. It's more about, you know, capital, right? Not about community. And
so give me an example of what sort of initiative you think would build community from a government perspective.
so, for example, having programs that enable individuals to start owning their own homes. You know, rent to own is one example, you know, but one that could be subsidized by the government, right, to make sure that folks actually live in their communities so that they're not victims of economic policies that push gentrification as basically the fact, right? And what we need to realize is that when folks own their homes, they have a roof on top of their head, right? That's at a bare minimum a basic human right. And when they're able to start thinking about the community, you know, they're more invested in it. That means they want to open up a business or volunteer or work in their communities, right? So I think it's about making sure that also there's economic opportunities for folks in their community. You know, there are many examples around the world where people actually have led those efforts. And not just governments. Governments have been supportive of those initiatives, but it's been led by the communities.
So can you give me an example of where, you know, in a different part of the world, people have engaged in community building?
Yeah, you know what? When I used to live in Kenya, one of the concepts of Harambee, you know, really caught my attention, and I still remember it until now. It's because, you know, when folks had problems in their communities, they didn't wait for the government to act. They started raising funds on their own. They started supporting those initiatives on their own, and then they used the governments as tools to make sure that those solutions are permanent.
So what sort of solutions did they
So, for
come up
example,
with?
like raise funds to build schools or install wells, right? Or community-based safety programs, right? Because folks lived in those communities, right? So they invested in making sure that there was actually investments made. And, you know, those are like led by individuals, right? Folks who, neighbors, right? Folks who just have a common interest in the common initiatives. And we see that here in Canada as well, right? Through so many examples in the non-for-profit sector where folks just come together through a common cause. So, for example, you know, we have actually local initiatives of community building. You know, the United Way is a great example of a charity that I support that actually invests in the social services sector. In fact, over $100 million. And that actually comes from individual contributions, voluntary individual contributions, right? Not just, it wasn't just a government role, it was folks actually acting to making sure that those gaps that have been left are filled, right, by folks from the community. And that's what community building is all about, is by making sure that, you know, folks are invested in that community, and that means that they're supported to continue to live in that community.
So I want to ask you a question about the Harambee movement that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So we have here a situation where the government kind of took a passive role in that process, right? But we have in Canada, we have a democratic government that really takes care of the needs of people. So in some ways, people might feel less empowered or as if there's less of a need to get involved in the community, to build community.
Yeah, well,
how would you respond to that?
You know what? I relate to that experience. I understand how folks, when they move to a new community, if they're lucky, they're connected to a community that they're familiar with, whether it's spiritually, ethnically, culturally, right? But in some cases, not, right? So they have to imagine new immigrants are, coming to Canada, to communities that they're not familiar with. So they have to trust that they will be able to transition, right? To be individuals that actually not just invest in the community, but can help build community, right? So what I think the best way we can do is making sure that we support folks that want to join communities, that want to be involved in their communities. Let's look at programs that allow individuals to just even get together over certain causes, because it's about building trust. It's about building relationships.
So what advice do you have for somebody, let's say somebody who moved into a new neighborhood or moved to Canada, for example? How would they begin? What are the first steps that they would take to start to build community?
You know what? Remembering it's a responsibility. First thing, as a spiritual person, a person of faith, as a Muslim, the concept of zakat is not just monetary donations. It's not just cutting a check, right? Or dropping $20 during Jum'ah. It's about volunteering in your community. It's about picking a cause that you deeply care about, that your neighbor cares about, and acting on it. That's a form of zakat. And it's also a form of expression of what your faith is about. And it's about humanity. It's about our shared humanity, right? So what I will challenge everyone to think about is being a responsibility, something that you have to think about and do in some way. And picking a small project. It doesn't have to be a large project. It could be something like, how can we improve our neighborhood, like our street? Or in our school, how can I improve our school? How can I improve our workplace? Those are actions focused on love, on improving community. And that's what we should be focused on. That's what Harambee is all about.
Walied, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.